I will now call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to adopt the final agenda?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you very much. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. The next order of business is to adopt the minutes from the September 7th, 2021 Commission meeting. Commissioners, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We have two discussion items on our agenda tonight. The first is item 3.1, final plat and zoning, shores of Marsh Lake by the Charles Cudd Company. I will now turn this over to Community and Economic Development Director Marty Dole for a staff presentation.
Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption on this.
No, that's all right. Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. Yes, before you this evening, we do have the final plat for the Shores of Marsh Lake development by the Charles Cudd Company. So just a little bit of recap on the process for this development so far. So way back in March, on March 1st, there was a neighborhood meeting held, and then a couple of weeks later, the sketch plat was reviewed by both the Planning Commission and City Council and feedback provided. This parcel was outside of our city limits, so in July of this year, annexation of the property was approved by the Minnesota Office of Administrative Hearings, so the parcel is now within our city limits. And then just here a month or so ago, back in August, again, both the Planning Commission recommended approval and the City Council approved the preliminary plat for this development. So as you will recall, the parcel that we are looking at is just south of Marsh Lake Road, east of County Road 43 and north of Marsh Lake. The proposal is for 42 single-family lots on 39 acres, approximately 14.2 of that being developable, which comes out to 2.95 units per acre, which is consistent with the comprehensive plan guided zoning for this property of low-density residential. Included in your packet, and here is the layout that is being proposed. Again, it is identical to what you saw during the preliminary plat process, but we can come back to this graphic if there are questions later. So as part of the Planning Commission's role when it comes to final plat with PUDs, is one of the items is to ensure that the conditions of the preliminary plat were taken care of or are going to be taken care of. So just as a reminder and kind of a status update of those conditions from the preliminary plat approval, the conditions included approving the zoning to residential shoreline PUD that will be considered by the council concurrent with the final plat resolution, adhering to all of the shoreland requirements related to Marsh Lake, and staff believes that the developer is adhering to those requirements, addressing to the city's satisfaction all of the items outlined in the staff and engineers memos. Those final construction documents are nearing completion. Those items that staff have been noting are being addressed, and the final plans will be completed prior to City Council consideration or conditioned for completion before recording upon final approval. Addressing to the city's satisfaction all berm and buffer requirements. As you'll recall, there was some questions about the berm. The developer has further refined that berm proposed adjacent to the future Marsh Lake Road right-of-way to minimize future impacts, and there were cross sections of that berm attached to your background. Addressing pond concerns, there is still one pond that is a challenge, but staff and the applicant have worked through that to try to come up with the best possible solution for that pond access, so we believe that condition has also been met. Complying with all the regulations of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District and receiving their approvals. Those approvals are on track and are required prior to recording. Deeding to the city a 100-foot riparian buffer along the shoreline of Marsh Lake. That is included as Outlot H within the final plat to be deeded to the city. That includes that riparian buffer. Dedicating to the required right-of-way for future Marsh Lake Road expansion and deeding all other required stormwater, pond, buffer, and wetland outlots. Outlots B, C, D, E, and H included in the plat are all intended to be deeded to the city for those reasons. Acquiring any necessary easements from adjacent property owners, or if those easements couldn't be obtained, revising construction plans to avoid the need for easement. As you may recall, during preliminary plat, there was a thought of potentially extending the cul-de-sac to the west into the neighboring property. The developer has opted not to do that at this point in time, and the construction plans have been revised accordingly. Providing the city with copies of all HOA docs and covenants for review. Those have been received this week and are being reviewed presently. Including all disclosures to homeowners that include information about the proximity and impacts of the Hunt Club, future Marsh Lake Road expansion, street extensions, right in, right out, etc. Those disclosures are included in the HOA docs as well as the city's letter of awareness that is required with a development agreement. Entering into a development agreement with the city, again, the council will consider that concurrent with final plat. Providing a letter of credit and paying all applicable fees that will be required as with all developments prior to recording. Obtaining all necessary city, county, PCA, and other regulatory agency approvals. Again, those approvals are all required prior to recording. Submitting title work for review and adhering to the city attorney's plat opinion. Title work has been submitted and the plat opinion was sent to the applicant today for some minor revisions. And then submitting the final plat to the city within 90 days of council approval of the preliminary plat, which has been addressed. So staff believes all of those conditions have been met or will be met with final plat approval. One note that was included in your background packet included a recent request from the Metropolitan Council related to a comprehensive plan amendment. This property is included in the 2031 to 2040 sewer staging area. The Met Council flagged this, indicating that a comp plan amendment was required. The city does not necessarily agree that a comp plan amendment is required because we do have language in the comp plan amendment that speaks to these specific flexible situations. But at any rate, staff met with the Met Council yesterday, had a very lengthy discussion, and in order to not provide any significant delay with the applicant receiving a sewer permit from the Met Council, presuming approval of this development, staff is going to be including a comprehensive plan amendment in the city council packet for their consideration on Monday. There are no issues with sewer capacity. It really is a color on a map issue. So we will be processing that with the city council on Monday. So back to the development itself, as you'll recall, the lot regulations that are being proposed for this development, these are the same as you saw during preliminary plat. 10,000 square foot minimum lot area, 65 foot minimum width, 160 foot depth, 7.5 foot setback each side, 25 foot front yard setback, 50 foot rear yard setback, or there are a couple of lots that do have a 30 foot rear yard setback, but a majority are 50, either for the ordinary high water line setback or for the berm and buffer easement for those lots on the northwest side. And then a 5,000 square foot per lot maximum impervious surface. Corner lots will be meeting the front yard setback. The riparian buffer that we discussed is going to be dedicated to the city. The development-wide impervious surface will be under the 25% that's required in a shoreland district at 18.8%. And then, as was noted in your background, staff is proposing 2 additional HOA outlots to include the location for monuments. So we'll be continuing to discuss that with the applicant here prior to the council meeting as to whether or not the plat needs to be adjusted. This is again just a screenshot of the outlots that we're talking about. So you'll see the large outlot H that includes that 100-foot riparian buffer. There'll be some stormwater ponding in that area as well, in addition to the future Marsh Lake Road right-of-way that is being dedicated. Again, this is in a shoreland area, so there are some prescriptive requirements when it comes to PUDs within a shoreland, and staff believes that the plat is meeting those requirements, including the adequate density determination in tiers, at a minimum of 50% total open space. This applicant's proposing 53%, and then a minimum of 70% of the shore impact zone being preserved, and with that riparian buffer, 100% of the shore impact zone will be preserved. As we've talked a little bit about, there is a berm to be constructed on the north side for those double-fronted lots on Block 1. Those are the lots on the northwest side of the development. The applicant is planning to adhere to the planting requirements for those double-fronted lots, so you can see the landscape that will be included along that berm buffer area. And then, as I mentioned, there were some modifications made to that berm. What staff wanted to do was reduce any potential future impacts if and when Marsh Lake Road is expanded, to not have any negative impacts to the lots. So you'll see that for the most part, the berm is staying out of that future right-of-way. There are some lots that do encroach on the downslope, but our engineering department has looked at that and believes that the impact, if and when Marsh Lake Road will expand, will be minimal, as the road itself obviously would not come all the way to this right-of-way line. There would be some available open right-of-way. Trees and landscaping. So based on the current tree count within the site, the applicant's required to replace 175 caliper inches, which equates to approximately 58 3-inch trees. They are proposing to plant 1,098 caliper inches, or approximately 366 3-inch trees on the site. That includes 84 lot trees, 2 per lot, 92 boulevard trees, 154 berm and buffer trees, and 36 additional trees. Staff has also recommended, and the landscape plan has been updated to include 2 lot trees in the rear yards, 1 deciduous and 1 coniferous, of those lots that are adjacent to Marsh Lake. And here's just the overall landscape plan, which also was included in your background packet. As was noted during the preliminary plat process, the comprehensive plan does not call for a park on this property. Based on the number of units, 1.96 acres of parkland is required, or approximately $205,800. Staff is proposing a reduction of that park dedication of $121,800 for right-of-way dedication credit, making the total proposed parkland dedication fee $84,000. The applicant is also proposing to construct a 1.79 acre HOA owned park within the development that is not eligible for park credit. Trails and sidewalks, this is identical to what you saw during the preliminary plat. There will be an 8-foot bituminous trail between the blocks 1 and 2 and block 3 to provide that connection, as well as 6-foot concrete sidewalk on one side of all local streets. Transportation and right-of-way, again, this is identical to what you saw during preliminary plat. There will be 2 access points into the development, 1 to blocks 1 and 2 through Lakeside Drive. That is will be a full access. And then the cul-de-sac on Shoreview Point, which will be a full access until such time as Marsh Lake Road is expanded as a county road. At that point in time, it is likely that will be a right-in, right-out only, and all local streets are to be built to city standards with 60-foot right-of-way. You saw this on the outlot graphic, but this is an indication of the right-of-way that's being dedicated for future Marsh Lake Road expansion. Site utilities and stormwater. So this site is subject to the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District rules. The applicant is continuing to finalize those plans, both with the MCWD and with our engineering department related to sewer, water, and stormwater. Again, those final plans will be required prior to recording. Utilities will be stubbed to the adjacent property lines to accommodate future development. I'm sorry, this further discussion on pond access is a holdover from my previous PowerPoint. There is no additional discussion required on pond access. And then there was, as you may recall, a question from the Carver County related to stormwater capacity for a potential expansion of Marsh Lake Road. And the applicant has looked into it and is able to provide that additional capacity for that additional impervious surface that would be added within their existing stormwater ponds. So that issue has also been resolved. Another note we had discussed during preliminary plat was a concern from a property owner on the south side of Marsh Lake who had some concerns with folks being able to access the lake for hunting through city and public owned outlots. We did have some subsequent discussions with our city attorney, and he has indicated that the city can restrict access to that outlot if it does choose and sees fit to not allow hunting access. Ultimately would be a decision of the city to do or not do. So with all of that in mind, staff is recommending, the Planning Commission recommend approval of the final plat, comp plan amendment and zoning for the Shores of Marsh Lake development with a few conditions, one being the final approval of that comprehensive plan amendment, addressing the remaining engineering items, entering into a development agreement and paying all applicable fees, the final approvals from the MCWD, including that inclusion of the 100-foot riparian buffer as wetland buffer, complying with all of the RSPUD district standards, complying with the city attorney's plat opinion, submitting and recording HOA documents or covenants, disclosing and recording a letter of interest outlining all of those disclosure items we discussed, complying with all applicable requirements, reviews, and approvals of city staff for any entrance monument that would be put in place, recording of the final plat within 120 days of approval, and furnishing the city with a certified Mylar copy of the plat evidencing recording with the county. And with that, Chair, that concludes my presentation. As you know, we do have some representatives from the applicant here if you have questions for them, and I will turn it back over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Marty. Thank you. I will now open the floor to the Planning Commission to discuss. Commissioners, any questions, comments, thoughts on the project?
I think everything is pretty much as we've seen and approved in the past. I don't really see any changes that.
What, question about the Leitner property? Did that get resolved, that the issue?
You're referring to the tree, the question about the trees?
Right?
And
So,
could you come up to the podium, please, John?
John Sonic with Charles Cudd Company. So right now she's thinking we're going to cut the trees down. So I said, okay, we'll move them over there. Well, yeah, but I lose all my yard then. And so she wants her yard more than she wants the trees. So we'll still have to plant some trees because the ones we cut down, we still need a buffer. So we'll, at that point that we get regraded, we'll probably figure out where the exact property line is and share between the two of us so that she doesn't lose grass.
So you have resolved?
Yep. And I've met with them twice since then, and she can stand there when we go into her we're gonna stub her sewer and water into her property, because their septic's shot and they're gonna need a hookup. And so at that point, Kara just needs to figure out how to charge them, because they live in the county. And so she has to figure out how to get paid for it. But we're gonna get the sewer and water stub into their yard also. And they're gonna get gas and electric as well. So.
Thank you for negotiating that.
Yep.
Between the two parties. Very
Yeah,
good.
not a problem.
Very good.
And we'll take care of her, as far as whatever she wants. So.
Yeah, she seemed to have been agreed with that the two of you can work it out. So
Yeah.
good deal. Thank you very much. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Any other thoughts, commissioners?
The only thing I wrote down were the county additions, that there were some outstanding issues or things that they had to do with the county. Are any of those showstoppers?
No, one of the items was just the question about the stormwater capacity. So we've had a couple of conversations with the county. We've done some looking. Again, the developer has done some calculations and made some tweaks to their stormwater ponding. So we believe that that should cover the additional capacity that would be included with the potential future expansion of Marsh Lake Road.
Cool.
Excellent. Any other questions, concerns? Now's the time. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the city council approve the final plat, zoning, and comprehensive plan amendments for the shores of Marsh Lake with conditions as presented.
Thank you very much, Jared. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you, Jerry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet. Gentlemen. Our second item is item 3.1, residential zoning district discussion. This is a continuation of our ongoing conversation on Victoria's residential district ordinances and is for discussion purposes only. I will now turn it over to Community and Economic Development Director Marty Dole for a staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Yes, we are continuing down the line on our overview of our residential zoning ordinances, and tonight we will be focusing on the PUD ordinance. Again, similar to our previous discussions, we anticipate that there likely will be some additional information that the council will want, or excuse me, I go to too many meetings. The commission will look for as we start to drill down into these areas. So we're thinking that the next time we bring this forward, which will either be our next meeting or the meeting after that, we'll do that where we'll start digging more into the details. But again, this is intended to be more of a background overview and anything that you want us to look into before we bring this back for discussion. So a lot of this language that was included in your background packet and is included in this presentation is either word for word or summarization of the language that is within the ordinance. So the ordinance does include a purpose and a scope for PUDs, which allows for innovative, creative, and flexible development that is sensitive to environmental, cultural, and economic considerations in partnership with public values as outlined in the comprehensive plan. So that's how the purpose and scope for PUDs is defined. The code does outline criteria for use, which indicates that a PUD can be located in any district and can incorporate the regulations of one or more zoning districts, as well as include specific requirements and standards that would be unique to the development. It does require that the area for a PUD be at least 10 acres in size, although less than 10 acres can be approved if a project is of superior design, unique densities, or a greater compliance with the comp plan can be achieved. It does indicate that unique physical features should be conserved, and the physical and topographical features that are important to the community should be retained. It allows for a mix of land uses, so a mix of land uses to accommodate demands of the population and type, design, and layout in these districts. And then also it should promote efficient and effective use of streets, utilities, and public facilities. So those are the outlined criteria for a PUD within our code currently. So the applicability of a PUD, it indicates that it's subject to additional requirements and standards that will protect the general welfare, public safety, and neighborhood character. It does note that a PUD should not be approved simply to circumvent one zoning regulation that prohibits the development under typical zoning regulations. In a PUD, it's also required to identify the natural amenities and sensitive areas and be cognizant of them with the intent to preserve such areas unless otherwise deemed infeasible. That's really not different from a non-PUD development, as we know we've got requirements from the watershed districts and DNR and other environmental items that need to be addressed regardless of PUD or not. PUD should conform to the density outlined in the comprehensive plan. All of the property within the PUD should be under unified ownership or control. No building or other permits are to be issued unless they're in compliance with the PUD. If no substantial development has taken place within 1 year, the city does have the ability to return the property to its pre-PUD zoning designation. Kind of the big one here is that this is where the ability to provide those differences in what's allowed in zoning code is that PUD does allow for the modification of the strict application of regulations of conventional zoning districts, but it is to be in harmony with the goals and policies of the comp plan, and then also kind of the catch-all of other requirements shall apply as deemed appropriate. So the development standards of a PUD as they are outlined in our code, the setbacks, lot area, impervious surface, and building height, those regulations are can be of the most closely related conventional zoning district, be considered presumptively appropriate, but they may be departed from. It indicates that sign requirements shall follow the provisions of the adopted sign ordinance or for the most closely related zoning district. The design of the PUD shall achieve compatibility with the surrounding land uses and minimize potential adverse impacts. If a development is to be completed in phases, each of those phases needs to address the criteria outlined in a PUD. And then specs and standards for streets, utilities, public facilities, and subdivisions may also be modified within a PUD. So the procedure is very identical to what you would see a procedure with a PUD request as you would for a standard development. We typically ask for a pre-application meeting with staff for staff to be able to review, provide some feedback, direction as to things that we think that the Planning Commission and or Council are going to want to see, and work through some of that before bringing a application forward. That then moves on to the sketch plat, which is reviewed by Planning Commission and City Council. There are application fees and required submittals, as well as a neighborhood meeting that's required. And then from there, we move to preliminary plat, which is reviewed by the Planning Commission and City Council. Again, there are applications and fees that are required, as well as a public hearing. Again, up to this point, no different than our typical development standard requirements. The only difference really comes in with the final plat, is that final plat is to be reviewed with a PUD by the Planning Commission and City Council, whereas if a development is under straight zoning, it would not need to come to the Planning Commission prior to going to the City Council. There's just a very short list of requirements of approval within the current ordinance: a development agreement and a letter of credit. That's in addition to all of the other criteria and things that we've discussed already. And that really is kind of the bulk of the ordinance language. So I also did want to just kind of provide some examples. We've seen a lot of these examples in our previous conversations on the residential zoning districts, but this provides a little bit of a comparison, so where we can see where in the past 5 or so years those variations from what's required in our standard single-family zoning come into play. So you'll see that of these developments that were approved in the last 5 years, all of them have requested a smaller lot area, have been approved for smaller lot area. All have smaller minimum lot widths. Many of them have smaller lot depths. Many of them have shorter front yard setbacks. Rear yard setbacks, for the most part, are staying within that 30-foot requirement. All of them on this slide include reductions in side yard setback, and nearly all of them also include increases to impervious surface maximum. And I couldn't get them all to fit on one slide, so these are the additional 3 developments dating back about 5 years. Moving on to the townhome regulations for PUDs, you'll see that these tend to be a little closer to what the standard zoning in our R3 and R4 zoning districts for townhomes tends to be. These have all been approved, absent Rolling Hills South, which hasn't been approved yet, but the ones that have been approved as a PUD to be included in an R1 zoning district, where they typically wouldn't be allowed by right, but they do, as you can see on the lot regulations. Most of them stick a little closer to what we have outlined as our minimum lot regulations for townhomes in those zoning districts that allow them. And so, you know, the conversation around PUD really is the city's providing additional density either through smaller lots or narrower lots or whatever it ends up being. And the city is supposed to see a benefit to allowing developers to do that. And when PUDs were first introduced, this was typically used to provide an exchange for natural resource protection, wetlands, tree preservation, that sort of thing. But today, most cities, as I alluded to, require that as part of their standard development. So we've got a tree preservation ordinance. We've got requirements of the watershed district for stormwater and wetland protection. So it really, you know, what the PUDs initially started out being intended for, it's become a little more challenging now because you have these things that are required of a development regardless of whether it's a PUD or not. So that change in development standards has caused some of the conflict that you see between cities and developers when it comes to PUDs. So I think we'd all agree, and most cities do, that PUDs are an important tool that allow us to provide flexibility for development without having to just by right give away, you know, huge amounts of density. Some developers view PUDs as a club that the city uses to extract additional unrequired gives. So again, without being able to use the wetland or tree preservation as a give, you know, some developers think that cities are taking too hard of a stance on what's required to get PUD zoning. And many of you are probably familiar with the Housing First, Minnesota's initiative that's been going on for the last several years. They're a coalition of builders and developers, and they're seeking some legislative action to reduce local control. Obviously, cities are opposed to this action, but a lot of their conversation is focused around PUDs and how PUDs operate. But with all that being said, I think that it's fair to say that Victoria has always tried to take a relatively fair approach when it comes to PUDs. So just a little bit of an example, we kind of showed the density that was included, or the reductions in the requirements and the bulk regulations that were included in some of our developments. The city received some benefits through negotiation of the PUD. These are some of our recent developments. So through the shores of Marsh Lake, we did have that preservation of shoreline. We did receive some dedication of right-of-way for future Marsh Lake Road expansion. The Rolling Hill South, which is currently in preliminary plat, that provides, as the PUD ordinance allows, for some mixed use, single family and townhomes with a rental component. There will be construction of a collector roadway, some right-of-way dedication for County Road 11 expansion, and then as well as extension of our utilities to the city's south growth area. Huntersbrook, similar to the Rolling Hill South project, is a mixed land use with single family and some smaller villa homes that allows us to meet the density, the medium density that's required or called out in the comprehensive plan, construction of that collector roadway, right-of-way dedication, and again, expansion of utilities. Madeline Trail, we were able to get the construction of the Cochia Lane collector road as well as some restoration of a farmed wetland. And then the Lake Town development, which has been prominent here again, has been some mixed land use, dedication of school property, collector roadway construction, and that extension of utilities to the south. So, you know, it's not an easy or uncomplicated matter, and I know that question comes up a lot when we're looking at PUDs. It's not a very well defined what an appropriate give is to allow the appropriate reduction in standards. But again, it just provides a little bit of our real world background and what we've been working with recently. So again, I think these are our items for discussion, which again, we don't need to get into great detail in tonight, but just some things to get the gears turning on. Are our current PUD criteria and requirements adequate to assess the viability of the PUD? And are our PUDs being used appropriately? Or are there other things we should be thinking about? So those are some of the items that staff has identified, again, to get the gears turning with the commission.
What % of our total activity has been PUDs? It seems like 100.
Absent the Lake Town 17th edition, which, as you'll recall, was a combination of Lennar property and then Marsh Point, I think is what it was called, that were preliminary plat approved under the old R2 zoning. None. It's all been PUD. That they were grandfathered in as standard former R2 zoning because they had received preliminary plat approval and had asked for extensions for a couple of years on those. But otherwise, everything else has been approved by PUD.
I think that from my perspective, the PUD is a way to get the homes tighter and circumvent our standards. It seems like that's what's happened the most. That's been, I guess, the toughest to accept. The side yard. We're squeezing them in.
Yeah, well, I think that's been the end result. You know, to a very large extent. I do think that the good in a PUD is very, very well defined. You know, I think that the flexibility that it provides and it provides for the piece of land that they're developing, I think is very good. I think that when I look at it myself, you know, the real control is really with you and Isaac in terms of working with the developer to maintain some of those, you know, some of those standards going into the initial planning stage. And I think that one of the comments is that there's very little, if any, control, and it's just a vehicle for packing them in. But you know, I think that the work that you do initially, I think is real key in my view.
Just one quick note too. I think, you know, tonight we're looking at PUDs in a vacuum, but obviously this plays together with the residential ordinances, R1, R2, R3, R4. So as we start to drill down into this stuff, I mean, some of the things we'll want to be looking at and considering is, are our current standard zoning bulk regulations, are they still adequate? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Again, as you'll recall, one of the items that we noted in a previous discussion is that right now we do not have a we do not have a standard zoning allowed for medium density single family residential. So right now the only way to achieve medium density using with single family homes is through PUD, and obviously we have some medium density that are guided. So those are just some of the things we'll need to think about as we're talking about all of this as a whole.
So then our work essentially would be the verbiage for the specifications. You know, are we too tight or are we too loose on lot size?
Yeah, I mean, I think that will be part of our discussion, Chair, members of the commission. I think that, you know, we'll want to review and we'll pull some comparative data as to our standard zoning. You know, we'll of course want to review the language and the requirements of our zoning districts.
In the one we just approved today, the Charles Cudd, if it wasn't a PUD, how would it have been different?
If this one wasn't a PUD? You mean as far as the actual development itself or the process?
Well, this is the development itself.
Larger lots. They would have needed 2,000 square feet larger lots, and I think they were at 65 feet width. So
would have had the shoreline buffer, right?
Yep.
So would have gotten that. So what else would they have not done the right of way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more of an argument that they could have requested compensation from the city for right of way, although we are providing some compensation in the form of park dedication reductions, although those are limited. It's not the full amount of that right away. So that's, there probably would have been more of a discussion about the city
They
compensating.
get 20% more homes in there?
Yeah, without sitting down and looking at how it plays out, but yeah.
Significant.
Part of what we're going to do, are we going to be looking at kind of where our numbers have been slated in the last couple of years versus kind of Waconia and, the other like development cities that are having the same thing? Because I think what has happened in the last 2 years is land is much more expensive. Materials are much more expensive. Development is much more expensive. So when they want to make a project work, they have to have more product on the same amount of land. And if they don't have that, it doesn't work financially and the developer's not going to develop. So I think that there's kind of that push-pull that we work with. And we're seeing it as everyone went for PUD and then tried to find something that they can give the city. That's not so bad in that there is some give and take. But it does make the process a little bit.
Yeah, Commissioner Murray, Chair, members of the commission, we'll certainly, we're planning to provide comparative data from other cities, but that's not to say that Victoria has to be Waconia or Chaska or Chanhassen. I think it's a good exercise just for us to see what our other communities are doing, but that doesn't necessarily have to drive, well, Chaska's got this, so we need to change, right? I think what's equally or even maybe more so important is ensuring that our zoning is consistent with our comprehensive plan. That's where I see a little bit of disconnect currently. As I mentioned, the medium density residential is one that stands out. There's not a way to achieve it outside of maybe townhomes, and we've identified in our comp plan that we want medium density. Here's the areas where we want medium density. But there's no way to achieve that with single family homes. So I think that will be a piece of it too, is not only comparison, but some self-evaluation with our comprehensive plan document, and are our ordinances in line with what we're trying to do there.
Gentlemen?
I think the PUD's just a tool for specifically going after each development versus having to go and change a zoning ordinance in order to put homes in and then get something back. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But when you have your last 15 developments all requiring PUD because your zoning laws are too restrictive, then that's when maybe we take a look at that, as long, again, as it maps back to the plan. Or maybe the plan has to change. Sorry, go ahead.
Not at all, sorry. But if part of the deal is to get something back from the city and all of these things that traditionally we were trying to get back, the gives are now covered under other ordinances, recognizing, whether the discussion on whether or not that's overly restrictive or not, are we getting anything back now of value if we're just approving them for everybody? And all of those things that we would have been getting for doing this, for making that exception to policy, it's already policy somewhere else now. So why?
Like the things that we're getting back are the ones that you listed before: right of way, extra yardage, more trees, just based on the ordinances that we've passed otherwise.
Yeah, it's definitely, Chair, members of the commission. It's definitely, as I mentioned, it is not black and white kind of this for that kind of thing, right? It's pretty subjective. It's one of the reasons why you are all sitting up here is to look at those and try to weigh those things out as a body of peers and try to help make those determinations if the PUD is worth the give and take. So.
Hey, I've been preaching 10-foot side yard setbacks for 2 years just based on the drainage in my neighborhood. It's terrible. No one seems to want to build that. And people are still buying them at 7.5, so.
They're getting tighter.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just what the builders are coming in with. And if you say that, okay, your standard is 7.5, next thing they're gonna come and say, we want 5 feet. And they're back to a PUD anyway, because they want 5 feet. And, you know, like Julie said, you know, I mean, not that, you know, we wanna be Chanhassen or Jaska or Waconia or, you know, but you don't wanna chase development away either. Eventually it's gonna come, Chaska's gonna get filled up, Chan's gonna get filled up, you know, and we're gonna have a product that we're gonna be able to market, and some of it, the PUD to me is, it's appropriate. I think we're using it appropriately. The zoning for medium needs to be put in there. But I don't think that changing our zoning requirements is gonna get away from us doing PUDs, because in a standard zoning requirement, you're gonna say, okay, well then you put the sewer in and we're not gonna pay for it, or, you know, or we're not gonna give you credit or any of that type of stuff. And so the developer is looking for some of that too on their side, that they wanna work with cities that wanna work with them. And there are some cities that don't want development. They wanna keep their farms, and they wanna keep they don't wanna have to expand their water treatment and their water towers and, you know, and all that type of stuff too, you know. But, you know, that's where having it with the comprehensive plan and what's our overall plan gonna be. The PUD needs to be, I mean, it's gotta be it's gonna be a part of it anyway. But I think changing the standards, you give them this, they're gonna ask for.
Yeah, the PUDs, I don't have a problem with PUDs. My question is, we've seen variations, right? Suddenly, this one wants this, then this one wants impervious surface, everybody to have at least 5,000, and then the lot's already changed. So how do we control within what we approve of the PUD is, you know, how far are we willing to go? What are we willing to give up to the base standards? Because it seems like it evolves.
Yeah.
You know, if you have the zoning standards, at least those are, you know, written down and those are there. The PUD starts to evolve kind of on its own. Well, this one is going to do an 8, and this one's going to do a 7, and this one wants 5,000 square feet impervious for everybody to build on, whatever. How do we control that? I guess would be my. And on the one hand, maybe you can't, because that's the uniqueness of the PUD, but it seems like somebody could come back and say, hey, you approved my PUD and you made me do this. You just approved this PUD and they got to do that. Why? Why was I mistreated?
Well, and you kind of see that in the Lake Town development itself. I mean, you go from Lake Town first edition to Lake Town 17th edition. I mean, it's not the same standard from all the way through that whole process. And, you know, the more Lennar asked, the more they kept asking, and, you know, and it kept changing and evolving. And some of it is due to economy. And even for the city, the more houses you have on there, the more property taxes you get, you know. Not that that's a give and take for everything, but, you know.
Hasn't helped my property taxes go down.
Well, it might have. It might be a lot higher.
It's not apparent. It's not apparent to me.
Slow burn versus fast.
I mean, I'm just
No, I understand what you're saying.
things out there that's and the builders are coming and saying, this is what the people. I mean, people are not buying the houses because they got a 7.5 foot yard
No,
setback.
yeah, some people don't want to mow that much, right? I mean, whatever.
And, you know, and so until people start saying, no, I want my house on an acre of land versus a half acre of land.
I think that, and then until, like, if we decide as a city, as a community that, you know, green space, you know, is more important than, and we want to stick to our impervious surfaces because we want the green, you know, we have to decide, I think, based on what the city staff thinks is fair and right, and what the benefits are of the development versus the gives that we give. But I do think we have to be careful of the flavor of Victoria, because the more you give and give and give, the more the community does change and has a different flavor. And then you can get community residents that have been here for 20 years that are going, wait a minute, this isn't what I signed up for. So I think there's a fine balance, but I agree with you 100% on the medium density. Like, there should be a place in our community where you don't have to have a half acre, because now I'm 60 and I don't want to take care of a half acre, but yet I still want to live in Victoria in a single family home. Like, there is that thing that says, how do we get Victoria for everyone? I know, you know, Victoria for a lifetime. Like, there should be housing for that as well. So I think that that's a great thing to look at this point.
Well, we're certainly in a very, very competitive market. And if we don't do it, someone else will. But, you know, I think in any business, my experience in any business is that the ability to say no becomes all important. So, you know, this is something that we really don't want to put up down there in the southern part. And you just say no. And, you know, they can go to some other area. You know, I was up in Corcoran, and that's a whole different environment. You know, not to go into the detail on Corcoran, but you talk about very, very small lots, and it's pretty incredible. Well, if a developer wants to spend the money and build, there's other places they can go. And I think it is a balancing act. I think you're 100% right. And I think ultimately, you know, and maybe Christian said it, is that, so what's our minimum standards? You know, I mean, let's define how far we're willing to negotiate.
Well, I think as commissioners, our minimum standards, if we don't feel like they're meeting standards that are good for Victoria, that's when we say no.
Yep.
I think that's our responsibility. Yep. And that's why I think, I mean, Victoria has a lot to offer, and we shouldn't discount that when we're looking at what people want to bring forward. We should think about, is this good for the community? Does this fit with the flavor of the community? And we should feel comfortable, if we don't think it does, saying no.
Yeah, and
because that's our jobs.
Yeah, it varies what they're putting in. Like villas, maybe the setback side yards don't have to be as significant as a true single family home, right?
Maybe the people in the villas don't want that, and maybe they can be closer together, but then have more common space that's like parkland or ponding,
right? They're not. That's all.
They don't want to do it.
Right. So the product maybe defines it too, then, right?
Yeah, we, chair, members of the commission, we discuss that a lot internally too, and I think product really does, even from a staff perspective, that changes the equation, right? As you mentioned, Commissioner Schwarting, you know, villa type product can go on smaller lots, and you don't have the impacts that you do if you have a large traditional single family home on a small lot with a tight setback. So I think that's absolutely part of the conversation on that.
Those would be for our new R3s, right? Or R4? Whichever one we have none of.
R4 is the one we have none of, yeah.
Got it.
Other thoughts?
Well, the comment that you made that developers think the PUD is a club. Do they really think that? I mean, I'm just.
If you've read any of the Housing First narrative, you would get the impression that some do. Again, I think in Victoria we've been pretty fair and we have good working relationships with
We're not
applicants. So
forced to do a PUD.
no, correct.
You just follow the standards.
Correct. So I would just preface that to say we have, or at least in my time here, have not encountered that type of back and forth with a developer. But again, I think we've been, as a city and as a planning commission, as a city council, pretty fair when it comes to those PUD issues. So
Yeah, I think we would all agree that the PUD is a very, very good tool for all, within the confines. And I think the confines are probably the key to it at the same time. So, and our history, of course, as has been stated, so what hasn't been a PUD lately, but it's that's going to be a balancing act, and I, as Julie said, I think maintaining the standards and just saying it doesn't work, the commissioners can say this is not something that works for me. Well, you can say that, that's not unreasonable. So
that's why you guys get paid the big bucks. Oh,
that's
I'm sorry.
where
Sorry.
So the
Under the table.
So one of the other casual conversations at a social event was the 2040 plan, and the need for the 2040 plan, the comp plan, to be reanalyzed with in a different environment, different group, different set of players at the same time. And I think there's a, I would agree with that. I think that an awful lot has changed in what, 15 years?
Chair, members of the commission, the current comp plan that we have was adopted in 2019, so it's relatively new, the 2040 comp plan.
Well, with COVID and suddenly work from home, might require changes, right? Because suddenly people may want to be further out because they don't have to worry about longer commutes. That's true. So suddenly to be out in a nice area, good schools, got a lot of parks,
Yep.
Suddenly the allure, it would seem, is greater to be out here. Until 5's under construction, then all bets are off. But I think the dynamics of that changes things dramatically. And we heard that in terms of how they're building, what they're building.
So but the details in it, I think, is in meetings coming up, I think the details is really going to be key to get into, and that's probably where the answers are at the same time too. So
That's where the work comes in.
Pardon?
That's where the work's going to come in.
That's where the
we're
work
really
comes.
going to have to be thoughtful about what we do.
and that'll be homework
For
at
sure.
the same time. Yeah, and that's good, because like Marty says, that's what we're getting paid the big bucks to do.
Well, I think Commissioner Kuhn made a great point. Right now we're at 10 feet per side yard setbacks, just using one example, and everything comes in at PUD at 7.5. If we drop to 7.5, is everything coming in at 5? So that'll be what you guys put together for us to look at, or is there a way that we ironclad, there's no way you can go less than 7.5 in R1, R2 with PUD, without PUD, building us a new water tower? We don't care, you're not going to get it.
Wait, did you see a new water tower? Hang on.
Wait,
Yeah, I want to be able to water my yard next summer.
Well, okay, wait, let's think about that.
Hold on.
But no, I think I'm just pounding on his point that I think he makes a good point.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other details that we want to go through at this point?
Chair, members of the commission, there's nothing else on our end. I will just preface that because we're getting into the hard work part of this, we probably won't bring this to the next meeting just to give us an additional 2 weeks to kind of get all of our stuff together. So we'll probably be looking at having our next conversation on this topic 2 meetings from now. So
When's our next PUD coming?
the last one that is an open application right now is the Rolling Hill South project, which actually I was just notified here recently. They are changing the name of that to Marsh Hollow, I believe. Does that sound right?
Marsh Hollow Point.
Marsh? I don't know if it's Marsh
There
Hollow.
was a name change.
That's kind of Halloweenish to me a little bit.
But that's
It's gonna be a
the
big monument sign. You might want to talk to him about that.
that's the last one that's currently in application right now. So
Nothing else on the horizons?
there are some other areas that we may get some sketch plat yet by the end of this year, but it'll be just kicking off the process on those. So we just have we had a lot of them this year. We had 5 or 6 applications, and Rolling Hill South is the last one that's in open application right now.
What was typical in previous years for applicants?
I think in 2020 I think we only approved 2 final plats in 2020, both Lennar developments. It ebbs and flows, but 2 years ago I think we only had the 2 final plats that came through. Laketown 15 and 16, I believe.
Very good. Moving on, I would like to officially welcome Dan Elliott. And if Dan would like to tell us a few things about himself for a few minutes.
Sure. I'll try not to bore everybody.
45 minutes.
45 minutes? Oh, 4 to 5 minutes. Dan Elliott, or Danny or Daniel, whatever rolls off the tongue easy for you. From central Iowa. Don't hold that against me. My wife, too. We were last living in Tucson, Arizona. I was in the Air Force, and that was my last station before I retired. And came up here March of last year. I have a background in information security and operations security, basically anything security related, particularly in the network or computer fields. And I just wanted to contribute somehow. We really liked the look of Victoria and the feel. We have friends that live in the same neighborhood that we're in now, up in Lake Bridge. And we visited them from time to time and kind of saw it growing over years. And when we got the chance to move up here, we're like, hey, yeah, that's pretty nice. Not too big, not too small, with a chance to grow. So now that we're here, we're hoping to get our feet wet and contribute, give back a little bit.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Well, we will put you to work.
Great.
Very good. Welcome aboard. And there was Jarrett has attended the last city council meeting, did you?
No. I actually attended online.
That's right, you had.
I sent the recap to Marty, which I no longer have because I sent the recap to Marty because I wasn't going to be here at the last meeting, but no one else was going to be here either, turns out.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have pulled that up and I didn't. Some things happened and some stuff got approved.
It was a very short, there was a workshop, which I didn't know about it, but I got online and I actually watched the workshop. And then there was a very little at the commission.
Yeah, so it was
City Council.
What was our workshop
There was a group of people.
I can pull it up. It was talking about roads, wasn't it? Because the discussion was like 82nd Street and the need for that.
I can't well, we're all together now in an official meeting so we can voice our true opinions.
I just know
I sent you two.
I told you I go to too many. Oh, okay.
workshop, that was.
Downtown parking ordinance was discussed at the workshop on this would have been the 27th, right? Was the meeting? Because you all were at the workshop on the 11th. We provided the same presentation that we did in the planning commission last fall, just to kind of get council feedback and thoughts on that. The council has directed staff to put any changes to downtown parking ordinance on hold for the time being until such time as we get back to whatever our new normal is going to be. They just, I think their opinion was that there's just a little too much in flux to really determine what the new trends are going to be and how parking is going to be handled down there. So we, luckily for me and maybe for this commission, we won't be talking about downtown parking, at least for a few months now. So that has been put on hold. And then there were some transportation issues. And then, yes, so the only regular item was I should have remembered this. These were all my items.
Well,
so
and I have the notes.
Okay. Yeah.
So now I actually can. So it was Fire Prevention Week, so they read a proclamation on that. No open forum speakers. There was the consent agenda was adopted. I'd say the big thing that came out of it that I thought was interesting was that there is a cable franchise application for MetroNet that was discussed. MediaCom is currently our only approved franchise, and anyone who has them knows that there are some feelings about that. That's the way you say it. I don't have them, so I don't have but Jaguar, MetroNet recently acquired Jaguar. Jaguar is in some of our homes. They do have fiber to the home some places not currently. I think it's kind of borderline depending on where you're located. But they are probably down the road on kind of looking at that at this point, because this has been almost 2 weeks away.
Yeah, so with Jaguar does have some internet and I think maybe even some telephone service that they provide within Victoria. Cable TV cannot be provided by any company without a cable franchise, and as Commissioner Murray indicated, MediaCom is our only cable franchise provider. So MetroNet is actually proposing to do a complete fiber build out to 85% of Victoria, fiber to the home, and then in addition to being able to offer telephone and internet, are requesting a cable franchise to be able to offer triple play television as well. So pretty big project there. Since that acquisition of Jaguar, they're working in a number of communities in this area, trying to get their infrastructure and product out there. So
Does that mean they're digging up my yard?
Internet will work really fast.
With
Telling in my yard, but I'm the caretaker of it.
with
10 feet from the streets, not really yours.
with all good things, of course, comes some pains. So yes, likely when construction actually begins, there's going to be, in a project of this scale and magnitude, there's probably going to be some hiccups and challenges.
They dug giant holes. Seemed like.
Kind of a mess.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think we believe that having competition is good. Providing additional choices and internet is a good thing. So
Once it all go on 5G, then you won't even need this.
I thought they're moving on. Aren't they going to like 10G now or something? Yeah.
Wireless. Let's just go wireless. Why digging up all the ground?
They just put fiber across the lake to our cabin up north. It's like, how are they getting fiber up there and we don't have it here? So I'm excited to have it. I think it's great.
Technology is the key, isn't it?
It's when you have 4 people streaming in your house, yes. People working from home, yes.
Go off to school, you have one less.
I know, that's true. Go to college and I won't have to worry. No, but and then the other thing is they did discuss that Jan Hassan's award for one of the best places to live, which was given the night before. I think they just found out about it. So.
The best place.
Was it the best place?
It was the best place.
Was it Money Magazine or
Yes, Money
Magazine? Which I think they were 5th or 6th at one point. Now they must have moved up the list. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, they were number 1 because they're next to Victoria. That's really.
That's all there was. It was a very short meeting. I was really happy because I had a sick kid.
Oh, boy. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Do you have anything else on that, Julie?
Nope, that's it.
Very good, thank you. Commissioners, anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Very good. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. We are adjourned.